I'm Eleanor Wilson, 68 years old and recently widowed. After selling my family home, I moved in with my son William, thinking it would bring us closer. That Thanksgiving Day, I spent hours preparing a feast fit for royalty. But right after serving my famous pumpkin pie, William stood up and announced to everyone, "Mom, if you don't pay rent, you can't live here anymore." The shock froze me in place. Little did he know what I would do next. Before I share this painful journey, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family. Robert and I were married for 45 wonderful years before cancer took him from me 2 years ago. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we were careful with our money. Robert worked as an engineering supervisor at the local manufacturing plant, while I managed a small dress boutique downtown until I retired at 62. We paid off our mortgage early, saved consistently, and lived within our means. Robert always joked that we were boring with our finances, but that boring approach left me in a comfortable position after his passing. Our 3-bedroom colonial home in Mapleton had been perfect when we were raising William and his sister Leanne, but it became too much for me to maintain alone. The yard work, the endless cleaning, and those basement stairs that seemed to get steeper every month. All of it reminded me that downsizing made sense. Leanne lives in Arizona with her husband and rarely visits, so when William suggested I move in with him and his family, I gave it serious consideration. "Mom, it just makes sense," William had said over coffee in my kitchen 6 months after Robert died. "That house is too big for you now. You could sell it, invest the money, and come live with us. We have that spare bedroom on the main floor. The kids would love having you around." His wife Stephanie nodded along, though I noticed her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "The children would benefit from your wisdom," she added, her tone just a touch too formal. I was reluctant. I valued my independence and worried about imposing on their family life. William and Stephanie had been married for 16 years and had 2 wonderful children, Emma, who was 14, and Tyler, 11. Their home in Lakeside Estates was lovely but modest, a 4-bedroom, 2-story house they'd purchased 7 years ago with a significant down payment that Robert and I had provided. "I don't know, William. I'd feel like I was intruding," I said. "Nonsense, Mom. You helped me through college. You and Dad gave us the down payment for this house. It's time we gave back." I didn't remind him that the help through college had been paying his entire tuition, or that the down payment contribution had been nearly 30% of their home's purchase price. Robert and I had always been generous with our children, never expecting repayment, only gratitude and love in return. After 3 months of gentle pressure from William and serious reflection on my part, I agreed. The housing market was strong, and my home sold quickly for more than asking price. I put most of the money into secure investments as Robert and I had always planned, keeping some liquid for emergencies and to contribute to William's household expenses, though he had assured me that wasn't necessary. "Mom, your presence is contribution enough," he'd insisted when I first moved in. "Just helping with the kids and maybe cooking sometimes. That's all we want from you." I'd always had a decent relationship with Stephanie. She was organized, focused, and ambitious, working as a marketing director for a regional grocery chain. She wasn't particularly warm, but I respected her work ethic and dedication to the children. Before moving in, we'd maintained a polite, somewhat distant rapport, seeing each other mainly on holidays and occasional Sunday dinners. I hoped living together might help us develop a closer bond. My grandchildren were the true joy in my life since Robert's passing. Emma was entering her teenage years with all the expected drama but remained sweet and thoughtful at her core. She loved art and spent hours sketching in her room. Tyler was all energy and curiosity, constantly taking things apart to see how they worked, just like his grandfather had done. The thought of seeing them daily instead of weekly was perhaps the most compelling reason for my move. I'd maintained my independence in other ways. 3 days a week, I volunteered at the community library, helping with children's reading programs. I kept up with my bridge club on Tuesday afternoons and attended water aerobics classes at the senior center on Mondays and Thursdays. I had my own car, a sensible Toyota that Robert had insisted on buying just a year before his diagnosis, saying it would last me into my 90s. My friend Marilyn from Bridge Club had expressed concerns about my decision. Eleanor, living with adult children is tricky, she warned during one of our coffee dates before my move. My sister tried it and was miserable within months. They start seeing you as a burden, no matter how much you contribute. William's different, I assured her. He's always been thoughtful like his father. Marilyn gave me a look I now recognize as pitying. People change when money and space are involved. Just promise me you'll have an exit strategy. I laughed it off then. I should have listened. The first few weeks in William's home were everything I'd hoped for. My room, a converted den on the main floor with an attached half-bath, was comfortable and provided some privacy. William had installed grab bars in the shower of the main floor bathroom and placed a small refrigerator in my room for my midnight snack yogurts, as he teasingly called them. Stephanie made efforts too, clearing a shelf in the pantry for my specialty foods and rearranging the kitchen slightly to accommodate some of my cherished cooking tools. The children were delighted to have me there, especially Tyler, who would bound into my room each morning before school to tell me about his dreams or show me his latest Lego creation. I tried to be helpful without overstepping. 3 nights a week, I prepared dinner, choosing recipes everyone enjoyed. On weekends, I often took the children to parks or museums to give William and Stephanie time alone. I kept my room spotless and helped with general house cleaning, though I was careful not to rearrange or criticize Stephanie's systems. But around the 3-month mark, subtle changes began to appear. Stephanie's good mornings became brief nods. Her thank yous for meals seemed forced. She began to rework dishes I'd prepared, adding seasonings or reheating them differently, implying they weren't quite right. Small comments emerged, about the water bill increasing, about the extra laundry, about my television being a bit loud late at night, though I always used headphones after 9. William's behavior shifted too. He started coming home later from his accounting job, often eating dinner in his home office rather than joining us at the table. When I asked if everything was all right at work, his responses were clipped. "It's fine, Mom. Just busy." The warm conversations we'd shared in those early weeks dwindled to practical exchanges about household matters. One evening, about 4 months after I'd moved in, I overheard them arguing in their bedroom. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but their voices carried through the heating vent that connected to my room. "I can't do this much longer, Will," Stephanie was saying, her voice tight with frustration. "She's everywhere all the time. She's my mother, Steph. What am I supposed to do? I know she's your mother. But this was supposed to be temporary while she figured out her next move. It's been 4 months, and she's acting like this is permanent. We told her it could be permanent. That was the whole point. That was before I realized what it would be like. The kids go to her with everything now. She's taken over my kitchen. Your mother criticizes how I parent without even realizing she's doing it." I sat on my bed, heart pounding. I had never criticized Stephanie's parenting, had gone out of my way to support her decisions even when I disagreed. The kitchen comments stung too. I'd been careful to clean up thoroughly after cooking, and had even asked permission before using certain appliances. William's sigh came through the vent clearly. "What do you want me to do? Ask for rent? Tell her she needs to find her own place." The silence that followed was worse than any response. After that night, I began spending more time in my room, emerging mainly to cook or help with the children when asked. I started eating breakfast earlier, before the family came downstairs, and often took a sandwich to my room for lunch. I reduced my cooking to once a week and asked before using any appliance. The joy of living with family was rapidly diminishing, replaced by the constant anxiety of feeling unwelcome. Still, there were bright spots. Emma would sometimes knock softly on my door, asking for help with history homework or wanting to show me a new sketch. Tyler still came in most mornings, though Stephanie had implemented a knock-first policy he sometimes forgot. These moments of connection with my grandchildren became treasures I hoarded against the growing coldness. I began giving William money more formally, $500 each month placed in an envelope on his desk with household contribution, written neatly on the front. He never acknowledged these payments directly, but I noticed they disappeared promptly. I also bought groceries regularly and paid for family meals out occasionally, trying to ensure I wasn't a financial burden. Marilyn noticed the change in me during our bridge games. "You're quieter these days, Eleanor. she observed one Tuesday as we waited for our other friends to arrive. Trouble in paradise? I tried to smile. Just adjustments. Living with family is different than visiting. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Remember what I said about an exit strategy? Might be time to think about that. It's just a rough patch, I insisted, more to convince myself than her. William's under pressure at work, and Stephanie's always been a bit particular. And you've always made excuses for them, Marilyn said gently. Just like you did for Leanne when she missed your birthday 3 years running. That stung because it was true. I'd always been the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed things over and made allowances. Robert had been the boundary setter in our marriage. Without him, I'd fallen back into old patterns of accommodating others at my own expense. As Thanksgiving approached, I hoped the holiday might improve the atmosphere. Holidays had always been my specialty. Times when everyone appreciated my cooking and organizational skills. Perhaps this would remind everyone of my value to the family. I began planning Thanksgiving 3 weeks in advance, creating detailed shopping lists and preparation schedules. William had mentioned that Stephanie's parents, Richard and Judith Collins, would be joining us, along with my sister Barbara and her husband George. With 7 adults and 2 children, I wanted everything to be perfect. I'm happy to handle all the cooking, I told Stephanie one evening as she worked on her laptop at the kitchen island. I know you're busy with that big marketing campaign. She glanced up briefly. That would be helpful. Mom's bringing her sweet potato casserole though. It's Richard's favorite. Of course, I said quickly. And I'll make sure there's plenty of pumpkin pie for your father. I remember how much he enjoyed it last Christmas. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. Perhaps that I'd remembered her father's preference. She nodded and returned to her work. I spent the Saturday before Thanksgiving deep cleaning the dining room and polishing Robert's mother's silver, which I'd brought with me when I moved. On Sunday, I began some of the advanced preparations, making cranberry sauce, baking rolls and freezing them, and preparing the brine for the turkey. Emma helped me on Monday evening, peeling potatoes that I would keep in cold water until Thursday morning. Grandma, can you teach me to make gravy? She asked. Mom's always comes out lumpy. I smiled, careful not to say anything that might seem critical of Stephanie. Sure, sweetie. It's all about whisking constantly. I'll show you on Thursday. Tuesday and Wednesday were filled with more preparations. I made 2 pumpkin pies, a pecan pie, George's favorite, and an apple pie for the children. I prepared the stuffing, chopping celery, onions, and herbs until my hands were fragrant with the scents of sage and thyme. Tyler helped decorate the dining room, carefully placing the fall-themed centerpiece I brought from my old home, and setting out the special Thanksgiving candles I'd collected over the years. Throughout these preparations, William remained distant, coming home late each night and barely acknowledging the transformation of the kitchen and dining room. Stephanie was civil but detached, making brief appearances to check on progress before retreating to other parts of the house. Thanksgiving morning arrived crisp and sunny. I woke at 5 to get the turkey in the oven, moving quietly through the kitchen in my slippers. By the time the family came downstairs at 8, the house was filled with delicious aromas, and I had fresh coffee brewing. Everything smells amazing, Grandma, Emma said, giving me a quick hug before grabbing a muffin from the basket I prepared for breakfast. Thank you, sweetie. Would you mind setting out the good glasses after breakfast? The ones in the china cabinet. As the day progressed, the kitchen became my command center. Tyler appointed himself my official taste tester, while Emma helped with the more complex tasks. Stephanie appeared occasionally, ostensibly to help but mainly rearranging things I'd already organized. The serving dishes should go here, she said, moving the stack I'd placed on the counter. And we always use the blue gravy boat, not that silver one. I bit my tongue and nodded, though the silver gravy boat had been my mother's and matched the rest of the silver service. Small battles weren't worth fighting. Barbara and George arrived first at 3 o'clock. Barbara swept into the kitchen with a bottle of wine and a warm hug. Eleanor, this is why you've always been the Thanksgiving house, she declared, looking around at the organized chaos. Everything smells divine. George patted my shoulder affectionately. Robert would be proud, Ellie. He always said your turkey was the best in 3 counties. Their warmth was a balm after months of increasing coldness. I assigned Barbara to vegetable duty while George chatted with William in the living room. The television sound suggested football was on, though William wasn't usually interested in sports. Stephanie's parents arrived at 3:30, Judith carrying her sweet potato casserole carefully. Richard, a tall man with William's jawline but none of his warmth, brought in several bottles of expensive wine. "Hope you didn't overdo it, Eleanor," Judith said by way of greeting, eyeing the kitchen. "At our age, we need to be careful not to exhaust ourselves." I was 68, not 98, but I smiled politely. I've paced myself. And had wonderful help from Emma and Tyler. The dinner was scheduled for 4:30. By 4:15 everything was ready. The turkey golden and resting, sides keeping warm, gravy smooth and rich. Emma had indeed mastered the constant whisking. The dining table looked like something from a magazine, with my best linens, Robert's mother's silver, and the good china Stephanie usually reserved for her dinner parties. "Time to eat, everyone," I called, carrying the turkey platter to the table with William's assistance. The seating naturally arranged itself. William at the head of the table with Stephanie on his right, Richard and Judith beside Stephanie, Emma and Tyler across from them, Barbara and George at the other end, and me between George and Tyler, opposite William. The meal began pleasantly enough. The food was praised, wine was poured liberally, and conversation flowed around holiday plans and the children's school activities. But I noticed William drinking more rapidly than usual, finishing his first glass of wine before the salad course was complete and quickly pouring a second. By the time we reached the main course, Richard had steered the conversation toward real estate values in the neighborhood, a subject that always made William tense. Stephanie's father had made his fortune in commercial real estate and never missed an opportunity to dispense advice or subtle criticism about William's more modest home. "You really should have finished that basement by now, William," Richard was saying as he cut into his turkey. "Every unfinished square foot is money left on the table." William's jaw tightened. "We've been focusing on other priorities, Richard." "Like what?" "Seems to me your priorities could use some realignment." Richard chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. He glanced toward me briefly. "Though I suppose you've had other arrangements to manage." The table fell awkwardly silent. Stephanie quickly jumped in with a question about Emma's art class, and the moment passed, but I felt the undercurrent of tension rise. By dessert, William was on his fourth glass of wine, and his face had taken on the flushed quality it got when he was upset. I served the pies with fresh whipped cream, moving around the table with practiced ease, making sure everyone had their preference. "Mom's pumpkin pie is famous in our family," I told Judith as I served her a generous slice. "Robert used to say it was the reason he proposed." A few chuckles circled the table, but William's laugh had an edge to it. I placed the last piece apple pie for Tyler, and had just settled back into my seat when William set his wine glass down with slightly too much force. "Speaking of Mom," he said, his voice carrying that deliberate quality of someone working to sound sober, "we need to discuss something." Stephanie shot him a warning look, but he ignored it. "Mom, Stephanie and I have been talking, and we think it's time to formalize our arrangement." He cleared his throat. "If you're going to continue living here, we need you to contribute rent. A proper amount, not just groceries or spending money." The table went silent. I sat perfectly still, my fork halfway to my mouth, unable to process what I was hearing. "William," Barbara said sharply, "is this really the time?" He ignored her too, his focus entirely on me. "We're thinking $1,200 a month would be fair. Or you could start looking for your own place. But the current situation isn't working." His voice hardened as he delivered the final blow. "No rent, no stay. That's the bottom line." I looked around the table, taking in everyone's expressions, Stephanie's tight-lipped discomfort, Richard's poorly concealed satisfaction, Judith's embarrassment, Barbara's fury, George's shock, Emma's wide-eyed distress, and Tyler's confusion. "I see," I said finally, my voice coming from somewhere far away. I placed my napkin beside my plate and stood slowly. "If you'll excuse me, I think I need a moment." With as much dignity as I could muster, I walked to my room and closed the door quietly behind me. Through the wall, I could hear the uncomfortable shuffle of the dinner breaking up, chairs moving, awkward goodbyes, Stephanie's too bright voice trying to salvage the situation. Minutes later, a soft knock came at my door. Ellie? It's Barb. Can I come in? I opened the door to my sister's concerned face. As soon as it closed behind her, the composure I'd maintained cracked. Tears came, not in dramatic sobs but in silent streams down my cheeks. I can't believe he did that, Barbara said, her arm around my shoulders as we sat on the edge of my bed, in front of everyone. At Thanksgiving. I knew things were strained, I whispered, but I never thought. After everything Robert and I did for him. Barbara's arm tightened around me. This isn't about you, Ellie. This is about him, his insecurities, his weakness. Richard's always had him under his thumb, and Stephanie's just like her father. I wiped my eyes, embarrassment gradually giving way to something else. A slow-burning anger I hadn't felt in years. What am I going to do, Barb? Where am I going to go? Barbara looked at me, and for a moment I saw our mother's determination in her eyes. You're going to come stay with us tonight. And tomorrow we're going to make a plan. You're not without resources, Eleanor. Remember that. Resources. The word echoed in my mind as I packed an overnight bag. Resources. Robert had made sure of that. And perhaps it was time I remembered it too. I barely slept that night in Barbara and George's guest room, my mind cycling through the events of the day and possible paths forward. By the time dawn broke, an idea had formed. One that made my heart race with both anxiety and a strange exhilaration. At 7 I called Thomas Parker, the financial advisor Robert and I had worked with for decades. I was surprised when he answered directly. Apparently even financial advisors work the day after Thanksgiving. Eleanor, how are you? It's been a few months. I've been better, Thomas. I need some information, and it might be a bit unusual. After 30 years, nothing you could ask would surprise me. What do you need? I took a deep breath. William's mortgage. I need to know if it has a due-on-sale clause and who holds it. There was a pause. That's not typically something I would have access to, but since you provided the down payment and were a co-signer on the original loan, I might be able to find out. Can I ask why? I'm considering buying it. A longer pause. The house? You want to buy William's house? Yes. My son has made it clear that my living arrangement with him requires significant rent or my departure. I'm considering a third option. To his credit, Thomas didn't try to talk me out of it. After a brief discussion about legalities and logistics, he promised to make some calls and get back to me. Barbara found me at the kitchen table, staring into a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. You're plotting something, she said, sitting across from me. I recognized that look from when we were kids and Jimmy Sanders pushed me off the swings. I smiled faintly, remembering how I'd organized the neighborhood children to exclude Jimmy from games until he apologized to Barbara. I'm considering a rather dramatic response. I outlined my plan. Barbara's eyes widened, then narrowed thoughtfully. It's audacious, she said finally. Robert would have loved it. Do you think it's too much? Too vindictive? She considered this. If you were planning to evict them immediately, yes. But it sounds like you're just planning to establish clear boundaries and expectations. The very thing William did to you, but with more grace. George joined us and we brought him up to speed. His reaction was less measured than Barbara's. Good Lord, Eleanor, remind me never to cross you, he said, but he was smiling. It's perfect poetic justice. Thomas called back around noon. You're in luck if you can call it that, he said. The mortgage does have a due-on-sale clause, and it's held by First National Bank of Lakeside, your bank coincidentally. The property has appreciated significantly. Current market value is around $490,000. And the remaining mortgage? Approximately $320,000. William refinanced 2 years ago to consolidate some credit card debt. I hadn't known about the refinancing or the credit card debt, but it explained some things. Thank you, Thomas. I'll be in touch about transferring funds. My next call was to Jennifer Coleman, an attorney who had helped with Robert's estate. After explaining the situation, she agreed to meet me at her office despite the holiday weekend. What you're proposing is unusual but entirely legal, Jennifer said, after I'd explained my plan. The bank has the right to call the loan due if they discover a transfer of ownership without their knowledge. But in this case, you'd be working directly with them. And I would truly own the house? All legal rights would transfer to me. Absolutely. You'd become William's landlord, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. I strongly recommend a formal rental agreement. Could you draft one? Something fair but comprehensive. Jennifer nodded. I'll have it ready by Monday. In the meantime, I'll prepare a letter outlining the change in ownership that you can present to William. The next step was the bank. I arranged to meet with Vince Harmon, the mortgage manager at First National, on Saturday morning. Barbara insisted on accompanying me for moral support. Mrs. Wilson, while this transaction is unusual, it's not unprecedented, Vince explained as we sat in his office. We call it a friendly foreclosure or mortgage assumption, though in this case you'd be satisfying the loan entirely. The paperwork was substantial, but by early afternoon everything was arranged. I would wire the funds on Monday, and by Tuesday, I would legally own the house where my son and his family lived, the house I had helped him buy in the first place. Throughout the process, my phone had buzzed periodically with texts and calls from William. I hadn't answered. The messages started apologetic, then became concerned, then slightly defensive. Mom, we need to talk about this rationally. Mom, where are you staying? Mom, Stephanie, and I just think a formal arrangement would be better for everyone. I let them all go to voicemail. On Sunday evening, sitting in Barbara's sunroom with a cup of tea, I experienced my first real moment of doubt. Was I going too far? Was this a disproportionate response to a hurtful but ultimately survivable slight? I closed my eyes and recalled the moment at the Thanksgiving table, the public humiliation, the casual cruelty, the clear indication that I was considered a burden rather than family. I remembered the months of growing coldness, the overheard conversations, the sense of being tolerated rather than welcomed. And beneath all that, I felt the grief of realizing that the son I'd raised, the man I'd thought was like his father, had revealed himself to be something else entirely. No, this wasn't disproportionate. This was a necessary correction, a rebalancing of power and expectation. Robert would have done the same, perhaps with less deliberation and more immediate confrontation, but the outcome would have been similar. He had never tolerated disrespect, especially toward me. Monday morning, I transferred the funds from my investment account to the bank. By Tuesday afternoon, Jennifer called to confirm that everything was complete. I was now the legal owner of 47 Oak Ridge Lane. The letter and rental agreement are ready, she said. Would you like me to have them messengered to the house? No, I replied, a sense of calm purpose settling over me. I'll deliver them personally. On Wednesday morning, 1 week after the Thanksgiving disaster, I drove my Toyota to the house I now owned. William's car was in the driveway. He'd been working from home more since my departure, according to Barbara, who had spoken briefly with Stephanie over the weekend. I used my key to enter, the familiar smell of home enveloping me as I stepped into the foyer. From the kitchen came the sound of a cabinet closing. Then William appeared in the hallway, a coffee mug in hand. He froze when he saw me. Mom, you're back. Relief washed over his face. We've been so worried. Why haven't you been answering your phone? I needed time to think, I said, keeping my voice level, and to make some arrangements. He stepped forward, his expression shifting to the conciliatory one I'd seen many times since childhood, the look that had always preceded a half apology for bad behavior. About Thanksgiving, I handled that badly. I was stressed, and Richard was pushing my buttons all night. I shouldn't have brought it up that way. No, you shouldn't have, I agreed. But it's done now. Is Stephanie home? He looked confused by my calm demeanor. She's upstairs in the office. Do you want me to get her? Please do. We need to talk, the three of us. While William went upstairs, I moved to the living room and sat in the armchair Robert had always favored. High-backed and slightly formal. It had always made him look like the authority figure he was. I placed my purse beside me and took out the folder Jennifer had prepared. William returned with Stephanie, who wore an expression of careful neutrality. Eleanor, she said with a nod. We're glad you're safe. The children have been asking about you. I'm sure they have. I've missed them. I gestured to the sofa across from me. Please sit down. There's something we need to discuss. They exchanged a glance before sitting side by side on the sofa. William leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Mom, if this is about the rent thing, we can work something out. I was thinking maybe we could reduce the amount. I held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. This isn't a negotiation, William. This is a notification. I opened the folder and removed the letter Jennifer had prepared. As of yesterday, I am the legal owner of this house. The silence that followed was absolute. William's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally, a dawning horror. What do you mean you own the house? Stephanie asked, her voice tight. Exactly what I said. I purchased the mortgage note from First National Bank. The debt has been satisfied in full, and the title now rests with me. I handed the letter to William, who took it automatically, his hands trembling slightly. This is impossible, he muttered, scanning the document. You can't just buy someone's house. Actually, I can. The mortgage had a due-on-sale clause, which allowed the bank to sell it to me. Everything is perfectly legal. I reached back into the folder for the second document. This is a rental agreement. If you wish to continue living here, you'll need to sign it. Stephanie snatched the papers from William's unresisting hands, her eyes darting over the text. This is insane, she said, her voice rising. You can't do this. Actually, she can, came a new voice from the doorway. Emma stood there, still in her school uniform, her backpack clutched in front of her like a shield. I just Googled it. It's called a friendly foreclosure. Grandma's right. It's completely legal. Emma, go to your room, Stephanie snapped. This doesn't concern you. It kind of does, Mom. It's our house too. Despite her defiance, Emma looked uncertain, her eyes darting between her parents and me. William seemed to finally find his voice. Why would you do this? To your own son. I met his gaze steadily. Why would you humiliate your mother in front of the entire family? Why would you treat the woman who raised you, who helped you buy this very house, like an unwanted tenant? We all make choices, William. This is the consequence of yours. So what now? Stephanie demanded. You're going to evict us? Make us homeless to prove a point. No one's being evicted, I said calmly. The rental agreement is fair. $1,200 a month. Ironically, the same amount you wanted from me. It includes standard terms about maintenance, repairs, and respectful behavior between landlord and tenants. This is blackmail, William said, his shock giving way to anger. This is a business arrangement, I corrected. Just like the one you proposed at Thanksgiving dinner. The difference is I'm not doing it to humiliate you. I'm doing it to establish clear boundaries and expectations. Dad, what's happening? Tyler had appeared beside Emma, his young face confused. Is Grandma back to stay? Before William could answer, I spoke directly to my grandson. Not right away, Tyler. But I'll be around more often. Right now, your parents and I are having an important conversation about respect and consequences. Like when I broke the window playing baseball and had to use my allowance to help pay for it, he asked. Despite everything, I smiled. Very similar, yes. William stood abruptly. I need to call our lawyer. This can't be legal. Feel free, I said, gesturing to the phone. Jennifer Coleman prepared all the documents. She's very thorough. As William stalked out of the room, phone in hand, Stephanie remained seated, her posture rigid. You've been planning this all along, haven't you? Moving in with us, playing the helpless widow, just waiting for an opportunity. The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. Stephanie, the last thing I wanted was to live with you and William. I was perfectly happy in my own home. This was William's idea, remember? And I've bent over backward trying not to impose, to contribute, to stay out of your way. But there's a difference between respecting boundaries and accepting disrespect. Emma moved further into the room, sitting on the arm of my chair in a silent show of support that brought tears to my eyes. William returned 10 minutes later, his face ashen. Our lawyer says she's right. It's all legal. The house is hers. Stephanie stood, hands clenched at her sides. So what happens if we refuse to sign your rental agreement? If we just leave? That's your choice, I said. But I think uprooting the children would be unfortunate, especially when there's a perfectly good home available to them right here. With strings attached, William said bitterly. Yes, with expectations of respect and consideration. The very strings you should have honored without a legal document. The room fell silent again, the weight of the situation settling over everyone. Finally, Tyler spoke up from where he stood by the doorway. I don't understand. Why can't we all just be nice to each other? Why did Dad tell Grandma to pay rent or leave? The simple question hung in the air, highlighting the fundamental issue better than any legal document could. That's a very good question, Tyler, I said softly, and one your father might want to reflect on. The first week after the confrontation was painfully tense. William and Stephanie signed the rental agreement, but spoke to me only when absolutely necessary. They began house hunting almost immediately, spending weekends at open houses and evenings scrolling through real estate listings. I had moved back into my old room, but kept most of my things at Barbara's, uncertain of how long this arrangement would last. The children were caught in the middle. Tyler confused and upset by the adult conflict he didn't fully understand. Emma alternating between supportive of me and loyal to her parents. The extended family's reactions were mixed. Barbara remained firmly in my corner, bringing dinner over several times that first week and running interference when necessary. George called William for a man-to-man talk that apparently didn't go well, based on the thunderous expression William wore afterward. Richard Collins called me directly, his tone surprisingly respectful. I didn't think you had it in you, Eleanor, he said, and I could hear what might have been admiration in his voice. It was a bold move. Can't say I approve of how it affects my daughter, but I understand why you did it. Coming from Richard, this was practically a declaration of support. Thank you, Richard. I hope you understand this isn't about hurting Stephanie or William. It's about respect. Respect is earned, he replied, which explains so much about William's behavior. No, Richard. Basic respect is a right. Enhanced respect is earned. The most unexpected call came from Donald Mitchell, William's father-in-law's business partner. Eleanor, I hope you don't mind me reaching out. Richard mentioned your situation, and I wanted to offer my support. What William did was unconscionable. If you need any advice about managing the property or dealing with tenants, even if those tenants are family, my door is open. My friend Marilyn was less surprised than I expected. I told you to have an exit strategy, she reminded me over lunch. I just didn't expect it to be quite so comprehensive. Neither did I admitted. Sometimes I can hardly believe I did it. Robert would be proud, she said, echoing Barbara's earlier sentiment. He always said you were the strong one, even if you let him think he was. By the second week, small cracks appeared in William and Stephanie's united front. I overheard them arguing late one night, their voices carrying through the heating vent just as they had months earlier. We can't afford anything comparable in this neighborhood, Stephanie was saying. Not with current interest rates. So we move further out. There are options in Riverside. Riverside? That would add 30 minutes to my commute each way. And what about the kids' schools? What do you want me to do, Steph? Crawl back to my mother and beg forgiveness. The silence that followed was telling. The first breakthrough came through Emma. She knocked on my door one evening, a plate of cookies in hand. I made these in home EC, she said, offering them to me. They're chocolate chip with walnuts. I remembered they're your favorite. I invited her in, and we sat together on the edge of my bed, sharing cookies and hesitant conversation. Finally, she asked the question that had clearly been weighing on her. Grandma, are you really going to be our landlord now? Yes, sweetheart. At least for a while. She nodded slowly. Dad was wrong, you know. What he said at Thanksgiving. Everyone thought so. Even Tyler knew it wasn't right, and he's just a kid. Your father was under a lot of pressure, I said carefully. People sometimes say things they don't mean when they're stressed. But he did mean it. I heard him and Mom talking about it before Thanksgiving. They were planning it. Her voice held the particular outrage of a teenager discovering adult hypocrisy. It wasn't fair. You cooked for us and helped with homework and everything. I put my arm around her shoulders. Life isn't always fair, Emma. But we can learn from unfairness, about how we want to treat others, about standing up for ourselves. Is that why you bought the house? To stand up for yourself? Partly. And partly to teach your father a lesson about respect and consequences. She leaned her head against my shoulder, a gesture so reminiscent of William at her age that my heart ached. I think he's learning it. The conversation with William himself came nearly 2 weeks after my return. I was in the kitchen preparing a casserole for dinner when he appeared in the doorway. "Mom, can we talk?" His voice was subdued, lacking the defensiveness of our previous interactions. I gestured to the kitchen table. "Of course." He sat heavily, looking older than his 42 years. "Stephanie and I have been looking at houses. There's nothing in our price range that makes sense for the family. Not with the way interest rates are right now." I continued preparing the casserole, giving him space to continue. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened. About what I said at Thanksgiving." He rubbed his face with both hands. "I was wrong. Not just to say it like that, in front of everyone, but to say it at all. After everything you and Dad did for us." "Why did you say it, William?" I asked, finally turning to face him. "What changed after I moved in?" He stared at the table, tracing a pattern in the wood grain with his finger. "I don't know. It was gradual. Stephanie felt like her space was being invaded. Richard kept making comments about us, still needing Mommy's help. The bills were higher than expected, but none of that excuses it." "No, it doesn't," I agreed. "But understanding why it happened might help prevent it from happening again." "So, where do we go from here? Are you really going to be our landlord?" "For now, yes. The rental agreement stands." "I think we all need the clarity of defined expectations." He nodded slowly. "And if we want to stay long-term? If we can't find another house? Then we find a way to make this work. With respect on all sides. And perhaps with some professional help." William looked up. "Professional help?" "Family therapy," I clarified. "This situation didn't develop overnight, and it won't be resolved overnight either. If we're going to live together or near each other, we need better tools for communication and conflict resolution." To my surprise, he didn't dismiss the idea outright. "I'll talk to Stephanie about it." 3 days later, the 4 of us, William, Stephanie, me, and at my insistence, Emma, sat in the office of Dr. Karen Reynolds, a family therapist Barbara had recommended. "So let me make sure I understand," Dr. Reynolds said after we'd each given our perspective on the situation. Eleanor moved in at William's invitation. Tensions developed over time. Things came to a head at Thanksgiving, and Eleanor responded by purchasing the house. And now you're all living together again, but with Eleanor as the owner and the rest of you as tenants. Is that correct? Put so succinctly, the situation sounded almost absurd. Yet when Dr. Reynolds laid out the underlying dynamics, William's financial insecurities, Stephanie's territorial nature, my grief-influenced decision-making, Emma's protective instincts toward both me and her parents, the tangled emotions began to make more sense. "What I'm hearing," Dr. Reynolds said toward the end of the session, "is that everyone here wants respect and security. You've just been seeking it in ways that undermine each other rather than support each other." It was the first of many sessions, some as a group, some in various pairings. Slowly, painfully, we began to unravel the knot of resentment, expectation, and misunderstanding that had led us to this point. One particularly significant moment came during a session with just William and me. "I think I've been angry at you," he admitted, "for being the strong one after Dad died. You were supposed to fall apart to need me. Instead, you were so capable. It made me feel unnecessary." "Oh, William," I said, my heart breaking a little. "I wasn't nearly as strong as I pretended to be. I just didn't want to burden you with my grief. But that's exactly what I wanted, to share your burden. To be the son you could lean on." It was a revelation that shifted something fundamental between us, beginning a slow healing that would continue for months. 6 months after Thanksgiving, our living arrangement had transformed in ways I never could have predicted. Instead of William and Stephanie moving out, we had renovated the house to create more separation and privacy. The large storage room and adjacent half-bath off the kitchen had been converted into a proper in-law suite for me, with its own entrance and small sitting area. The rental agreement remained in place, but with modifications. William and Stephanie paid a fair market rent, and I used part of that income to cover the property taxes and insurance, setting aside the rest for house maintenance and improvements. More importantly, the emotional dynamics had shifted dramatically. Through our ongoing therapy with Dr. Reynolds, William had begun to understand how his relationship with Richard had shaped his behavior toward me, how he had internalized his father-in-law's transactional view of family relationships. "I thought that's how adult relationships worked," he confessed during one session, "that everything had to be even measured, accounted for. That's how Richard operates and he's successful, so I thought." "Success isn't measured by your bank account," I reminded him gently. "Your father knew that. It's measured by the love and respect you give and receive." Stephanie and I had reached a détente of sorts. We would never be best friends, but we had developed a mutual respect. She had admitted, in a private conversation that surprised us both with its candor, that she had been jealous of my relationship with Emma. "She talks to you about things she won't discuss with me," Stephanie had said. "Art, books, her friends. With me, it's just arguments about screen time and homework." "That's because I'm not responsible for disciplining her," I pointed out. "It's easy to be the good cop when you're not the one enforcing rules." After that conversation, we had worked out a system where Stephanie and I presented a more united front on household expectations, while still preserving the special relationship Emma and I shared. The grandchildren had adjusted remarkably well. Tyler, especially, seemed relieved that the tension in the house had dissipated. "It doesn't feel spiky anymore," he explained in his 11-year-old wisdom. "Before, the air was all spiky. Now it's smooth again." Emma had emerged from the experience with a new perspective on family dynamics and conflict resolution. "I want to be a therapist when I grow up," she announced one evening at dinner. "Or maybe a judge. Someone who helps people work out their problems fairly." One of the most healing moments came 4 months after Thanksgiving, when William asked if he could host a family dinner. "Not a holiday, not an occasion," he explained. "Just family." That evening, with Barbara and George joining us, William stood at the head of the table and raised his glass. "I want to make a toast," he said, his voice steady but emotional, "to my mother Eleanor Wilson, who taught me the hardest lesson of my life, that respect isn't optional, it's essential. Mom, I'm sorry for how I treated you, and I'm grateful for the chance to make it right." I blinked back tears as glasses clinked around the table. "To Eleanor," echoed around the room. Later that evening, as Barbara and I washed dishes side by side, she nudged my shoulder gently. "You did it, Ellie. You stood up for yourself, just like Robert always wanted you to." "I think I had to lose him to find that strength," I said softly. "When Robert was alive, I let him fight my battles. After he was gone, I had to learn to fight them myself." "Well, you certainly picked a dramatic first battle," Barbara chuckled. "Buying the house out from under them. I still can't believe my sweet sister did that." "Neither can I sometimes," I admitted. "But I don't regret it." The experience had rippled outward in unexpected ways. After sharing my story in a grief support group, I was invited to speak at the local senior center about financial empowerment and family dynamics. That led to a small informal support group for older women navigating complex family situations, which now met weekly in my living room. "You've become quite the community organizer," Marilyn commented during one of our bridge games. "Robert would be so proud." "I think he would," I agreed, though he might also be a bit surprised. I've surprised myself. The most profound change, however, was internal. I had discovered a strength and clarity I hadn't known I possessed. The woman who had hesitantly agreed to move in with her son, who had tiptoed around his house trying not to impose, who had accepted growing coldness with resigned accommodation, that woman was gone. In her place was someone who understood her own worth, who set boundaries with confidence, and who recognized that love without respect isn't love at all. On a warm evening in May, exactly 6 months after the Thanksgiving that had changed everything, I sat on the back patio watching Emma sketch the sunset while Tyler and William tossed a baseball back and forth on the lawn. Stephanie came out with a tray of lemonade, sitting beside me with a companionable ease that would have been unimaginable half a year earlier. "It's nice, isn't it?" she said, watching her family. "Everything turned out okay." Better than okay, I agreed. But it took all of us to get here. As the golden light faded and the first stars appeared, I thought about the journey we'd taken, from hurt to healing, from broken to mended. Not perfect, not without scars, but whole again in a new and stronger configuration. Life rarely gives us perfect endings, but sometimes it gives us the chance to write a better chapter. In standing up for myself, I had given my family the opportunity to rise to a higher standard. In refusing to accept disrespect, I had opened the door to deeper respect. And in asserting my worth, I had reminded everyone, including myself, of what truly matters. Have you ever had to take a dramatic stand to earn respect from family members? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones fought across the kitchen table, aren't they? If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to see more real-life family stories, and share with someone who might need to be reminded of their own worth. Remember, it's never too late to stand up for yourself with grace and dignity. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to write your own better chapters.